I would like to call the meeting of the Budget Committee to order. It's 7 p.m. on April 23rd, and if you could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Our next item is public input. We don't even have any chairs out, so there is nobody here tonight from the public other than people watching us at home on TV. Review and revision to the agenda. I'm not aware of any changes, any additions. We do have a set of minutes from our March 26th meeting. If people had a chance to look them over, and if there are...
I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstain?
Abstain.
One abstain. Correspondence, we had several items of correspondence since our last meeting. We had some information about some enrollment data information that we had asked for. We had information about bus use. We had school financial information. We had, actually today we got enrollment. Did I forward that?
Yes.
Okay. Enrollment, we had a letter from Frank Byron, and we had some information again from Frank about the status of the salt sheds, and then we get our weekly expense reports from the town. And that's all I'm aware of for correspondence. So if you want to jump right into town business, Frank, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, in terms of just stuff going on, there's not too much happening. As you can see, the state of affairs in terms of the plowing and whatever is, as you would suspect, with the winter we just had, so I won't bother. You can see that easily for yourself and what have you. A couple things to talk about. Agricultural Commission, we're looking for volunteers for that. So far, we've had one volunteer. If anybody knows of anyone who wants to serve on an Agricultural Commission, then please let Jason Hoke know about that, because we are looking for people. The warrant article for the 20K for the fire replacement vehicle, the fire truck, we have not found a vehicle as of yet. We're still looking, so that money has not been committed. The tasers have been replaced, so everybody in the department now has a new taser that is capable of delivering 2 at once, if so, double shot, I guess. And once it's attached, they can keep pulling the trigger and doing their thing, so it's a new technology. And as they say, you get to ride the lightning, so.
All the selectmen did that?
Yeah, actually, they did. Twice.
Really? You got tased?
No, I'm being facetious, and so is he.
My heart would have stopped.
I think that's a good idea. I think you guys need to try them out just to make sure that they work appropriately.
Well, we took a vote and that we thought the Budget Committee should go first.
I think the chair should try it out. Let
Absolutely. All those in favor?
I've always wanted to know, but no, not that bad.
I will tell you this, that I was told by Chief O'Brien that it is the longest 2 seconds or 3 seconds of your life. So I have no desire to try it out. The air pack, we don't have any status update on the grant for the air pack, so we don't know where that stands right now. We're still waiting for information on that. And one thing, and I don't know whether this affects the school or not, but Property Liability Trust, which is the organization formed by the local government center to handle property and liability insurance, that type of thing, has stated that they have now closed their doors. And they will be continuing to manage the contracts that they have in place, but they will not be taking under contract any new clients. The reason for that is the fact that the continuation of the lawsuit, or the continuation of the, I'm trying to pick a word that,
Breakout?
well, the Secretary of State's office, the Bureau of Security Regulation has continued to press them, I'll call it, in terms of all types of stuff. And they decided that they could not afford to spend any more money on legal matters, so they basically folded them, which leaves one company right now that will be doing those types of things. And we have the Secretary of State to thank for putting them out of business. So effective July of 2016, the town will have to do something different for our liability insurance, and most likely will go to Primex. We're a little bit puzzled as to why Primex hasn't been gone after in the legal sense, the same as property and liability trust, because they're doing it the same way.
Exactly the
But-
same way.
Yeah, but you never know. So right now, PLT is gonna not take any more contracts effective immediately, and that'll be the end of it, and they'll just play out. This will last for several years, because they will have continued claims and stuff that they'll have to manage through the system, but they'll eventually be out of it in total. And like I said, I don't know whether the school does anything through them as well or not, so I can't address that. And the other thing is, if you're wondering where the paving came from for the parking lot at Dara Pond, I figured I would say this before people asked. That was a donation to the town, so that's, basically the town has not spent any money on that, and that has been gratefully accepted as something that will prevent the rutting and the puddles and you name it, for the Dara parking
The
lot.
whole thing, Frank?
I don't think it's as big, Bill, as, you know, where people have been parking, but it's a pretty good size. It's, you know, I haven't gone in there yet, but when I drove by and looked at it, especially this morning, it looked like it came maybe 10 or 15 feet in from where it was before, but
What it looks like, and I haven't gone in to be sure of what's going on either, but they paved a straight path from the entrance to the building. So now where it was dirt, it's now a straight pathway.
that was the
On-
day before.
Yeah, well,
Today, they've gone
well, on
this way.
either side, it looks like it's just stone dust. They leveled it and maybe
Did they?
put stone dust
There was
down.
gravel being put down.
Yeah, it doesn't look like tar, but like I said, I haven't gone in to actually,
Anything's better than what was there.
Yeah.
It looked to me that they had tarred all the way out.
had they,
Yeah, but I, don't quote me on it. I do know it's,
better.
yeah.
That,
But it will be done, because it looked the same to me when I ran by this afternoon, so they can go in there.
So anyways, that was a donation to the town with no cost. We didn't spend any taxpayer money on that, so just to let you know.
Now I can tell my wife who asked me, was that on the budget?
The answer's no, because at 8 o'clock this morning, when I was driving to Concord, I go, who the hell? Who authorized that? Where's the money coming from? And I was told, calm down. So that's what I was told, that it was a donation. So that's it in general terms for an update. There's, like I said, we're in the slow part of the year. Hopefully we don't get any more snow, but you never know.
Snowing up
I
north
think we're
today.
supposed to be,
knock on wood, because I think you just jinxed us.
I do know that somebody told me that they had gotten 3 to 5 inches up north, so. Now, did you want to go over, Madam Chair, the special fund balances?
yes, there was a request to go over on the special fund balances, so.
Okay, so,
This is more for information, Frank, is why I asked to do
Yeah.
it.
no, that's fine.
Yeah,
I just want to make you aware that we were playing some games. And the games that we were playing is we changed the name of a report to see who would notice. So this is the same report you've been receiving now for a couple of years, just with a new name. But anyways, just to go through it, and I don't know if you have that in front of you, but if you do, there's a couple different sections to this. I'll go through these and just give a brief overview of what they are. Police detail is self-explanatory. I think everybody knows what that is. This is a wash fund that basically is used so that when the police handle a detail, they get paid out of that fund. The money comes in, replaces it, then goes back into the general fund, and it's basically just washed straight through. And it says here, recreation revolving, which is a revolving fund that had been set up for recreation for quite some period of time. They've used it in the past to buy things like movie tickets, where they'd buy a group of movie tickets, and as the money would come in, they'd backfill the money into the fund. It's also being used for some of the stuff like comedy nights. It's being used for different things. The Winterfest that was held, for example, had some money used out of there and everything else.
There's no restriction on what that was spent on.
Just recreation activities. So that was set up many, many years ago. I can't even remember when, but it's been quite a while. Then there's the school board recreation fund. Oh, it just says here SB recreation, so I meant it was school board. I guess it's not, though. Yeah, you got $8,524.04, but it actually stands for Sawmill Brook Recreation. That was a result of a development when Sawmill Brook was going in. I thought school board sounded better. I could create some controversy, but I guess not.
It's the slow season, right?
Yeah. So what ended up happening is when the developer was putting in the facility up, the development up to the north part of town, there was discussions on the part of the developer about dedicating a lot with the potential of having that lot turned into like a playground area or something like that for the people up in the north part where they could bring their kids, that type of thing. The developer decided that it would be more feasible and economically viable for him if instead to make a contribution to the town in terms of doing that, so that's what they did. And that's really what this is. This fund right now is being used in some cases for field use and stuff like that. So the Recreation Commission actually used some of the money recently to do the, I guess it's called the Sawmill Brook fields that are just north of the back of the tennis courts up in the north part area. Do some things like that up there.
Is this restricted just to Sawmill Brook?
It's restricted strictly for recreation. It's questionable whether it's Sawmill Brook or not. I think the idea of it having to be in the Sawmill Brook isn't necessarily a firm thing, so it can be used elsewhere. Conservation Land Fund, I think everybody knows what that is, 80% of the land use change tax for land that's set into, I'm having a mental block here, what's the name of it? Conservation, not easement, but
Not
current use.
Current use.
Great, oh,
It's a
I didn't know
current-
where we were going with it.
Yeah, it's a current use tax that funds this. I think it's 80-20, so 80% of it goes into this fund, 20% goes into the town. And this is used to buy property. This was up towards, if not over, $1 million. And recently came down when the Conservation Commission purchased the property right off of 3A. Conservation Education, this is a holdout fund. It was originally set up to do some types of things like brochures on wetlands and how to handle pesticides and things like that. We kept that fund there, and at some point it'll be rolled into the Conservation Land Fund. The concern we had originally was that the Conservation Land Fund, because we set it up under different names and things, wasn't adhering to the RSAs on what it could be used for. So before we merged this in, we wanted to make sure that everything was clear. So now that it's clear, we can merge them together, and we'll probably at some point do away with the Conservation Education Fund. That's already been talked to with Joan McKibben, and I think that'll disappear. Cable equipment is a monies that are collected from the franchising authority for the cable within our community. And it's a one-time monies that are used for the purchase of equipment, such as you've got in the back room over here, as well as at the town hall, that type of thing. So that is the actual hard equipment, hardware that's used for the broadcast, that type of thing. As compared to the Cable Revolving Fund, which is a fund that is used for funding things like the people who are working on it. It could also be used for equipment, that type of thing. So they are collected differently. The cable equipment fund is once the contract was signed, it's a one-time dedication to the town.
There's no more money going into this.
No. The cable revolving fund, on the other hand, has a 2% on the cable bills for franchise fee. And that does replenish over time. Now, the Board of Selectmen has cut that down. At one point, it was 5%. We cut it to 2%, and we put it at 2% to see where things would go, and our intention is to try and keep it around $50,000 a year max, because that's what we estimated the cost of doing all of this type of stuff with all the people would be. So we may have to adjust the number from 2% down or wherever it goes, depending on how this fund goes over time.
That 45,000 must have been there for a while, though, because that contract was 2 or 3 years ago.
I think so.
Haven't had a need to use it.
No, but they should be. They should be updating some of the stuff. We haven't received, as far as the Board of Selectmen goes, any updates in terms of what they want to do with equipment, that type of stuff.
It's the length of the contract, so you want to spend it over the length of the contract.
Why?
For that reason in particular, Bill.
To spend it all up front, then you have aging equipment, the length of, several years down the line, now you don't have any fund to replace anything. So the idea was that you, rather than spending it all at once, you sort of save it and dole it out as equipment ages.
Okay. That's actually cable revolving.
Yeah.
But there's also ambulance revolving fund, and that's the fund. It's basically bad debt, is what it is. So if somebody takes a ride in the ambulance and does not pay their bill, what happens is we get sent the bill from the town of Hudson. We have to pay the bill, so the money would come out of here, and then it's up to Litchfield to collect that money and backfeed that into this fund to make it whole again. So that's basically what it is a transfer mechanism to handle the bad debt that we have experienced in terms of ambulance rides. The DARE fund, I think everybody knows what the DARE is, although the DARE program isn't really up and running anymore. Since Officer Bennett left the town, he was the prime driver, if I'll call it, of the DARE program. But the DARE fund was money that was set aside, was donated to the town, that type of thing, and continues to sit there, and we'll keep it there until we decide what we want to do with the DARE fund. I'm not going to go through all the escrow accounts. I will just tell you in simple terms, the escrow accounts are managed really, or are part of the planning board function. What ends up happening is when a developer comes in, we don't have a town engineer, so we need to hire an engineer. That gets paid for by the developer. So what happens is the developer creates an escrow fund, and we send the engineer out to do things like review the plans, review the installations against plans, make sure that any roads that are being built, for example, by the developers are built according to specification, that type of stuff. And the developer then bills the town, and then the town or the planning board authorizes that the money be taken from the escrow accounts to pay the bills. So that's basically how it works. So all of these are developments or programs in town that are being handled by the planning board, and these are all monies that are set in there to be handled by the pay for the engineering fee. It also covers the work that is done by the National Regional Planning Commission to do reviews on the plans to ensure that they comply with the Litchfield Code zoning ordinances. Impact fees, I think everybody knows what impact fees are. They should by this point in time. But those are collected on new development in general terms, and they go towards supporting an expansion of town services needed to support that expansion in terms of town population. I will tell you, and I'm not prepared to talk about it tonight, that the town has recently just adopted new impact fees and a new structure for those impact fees and everything else. And that was adopted at the selectmen's meeting last week, Monday, I believe it was. Or this week, Monday. Time flies. One Monday in the past 2 weeks.
thought the criteria for the use of the impact fees was new capital expenditures as a result of growth.
Hmm?
Uh, And that became a real issue with elementary, for example, because there was no growth going on in terms of population at the school. And it's over $200,000 in there now. Am I wrong in saying that?
Are you wrong in saying that it was, no, it is for capital, it is for taking into consideration any new growth that's needed. Because the school is losing pupils, and that's a general trend throughout the state, it's not just Litchfield. There was, I believe, a suspension of the collection of the elementary impact fees. And what's happening is, as these fees come up on their time point, which is, I keep mixing this up, whether it's 5 or 6 years, I think it's 6.
Thought it was 7 on those.
No, I think it's 6 years. Then what happens is those monies go back to the developer, and they go to the developer, and they come out of the town's books.
So the odds are that actually the school one probably will never be spent.
After the school one, what, Bill?
The school ones probably will never be spent, elementary and high school impact fees,
Not unless the school submits a request for the impact fees.
based upon growth.
Isn't it also expanded service? Because wouldn't that also apply to, for example, the state required kindergarten? It seems to me that may be able to be used rather than portables to do something more permanent for kindergarten.
That's a legal opinion, and while I slept at Motel 8 last night, I am not an attorney and can't give you an answer on that. But I can tell you that I believe, if I'm not mistaken, one attorney said that the kindergarten was not an expansion of service, and therefore we couldn't use impact fees for it. Somebody else, I believe, has said that we could potentially buy, and I thought it was in front of the school board at one point to determine that, the portables that we have at the middle school, which we bought, and I believe that impact fees went to that.
Pay for that, yeah.
So it's kind of like a mixed bag. Basically, what ends up happening is before we make a determination on anything, for the most part, we determine whether the lawyers are in favor of it or not, so we
Now,
try
isn't
and
it
vet it
that-
that way.
Isn't that situation similar to virtually all the other impact accounts here? Library, for example? Growth and usage maybe,
Should be.
recreation? Yeah,
Recreation, we're grossly behind in, I know, but, no, to your point is the town losing population, or are we losing students? I don't have any evidence that the town's losing population, but I do have evidence that we're losing students.
no.
So the two aren't necessarily connected, Bill.
Fire the same way, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway. Okay.
Okay. Fire detail. Fire detail is the same thing as the police detail fund. So in other words, when the firefighters go out on not a service, but an event, they would be paid, and then any pay that they get is washed through this fund. So it handles the same as the police detail.
Okay, with the police detail, we've actually used some of that detail money to offset expenditures in the capital budget.
And the
Same thing can be true in the fire?
It's true. The problem we have is trying to apply that only to what would be used in detail. For example, to your point on police, we could use police detail funds for doing an oil change on a cruiser that's used on a detail. I'm making up
Private
something.
fuel, the gasoline.
Right. On the other hand, trying to select what would be used on a detail is a tougher thing to do for fire, because it's only a small fraction. We don't send tanker trucks out to do details. There could be a case made that we would send the rescue vehicle out. Okay, so maybe some of the stuff, if we were gonna use to equip the rescue vehicle or work on the rescue vehicle, that may be able to do it. Part of the reason this is so high is because of a problem with the town's books before about 2009. So trying to, theoretically, both the fire and the police detail should wash to zero. There should be no money left. And the reason for that is all the money that gets put into that fund should go to the employee who worked the detail. It should also go to, a small portion of it go to the administrative costs for handling that detail, to pay for any of the equipment that's used, like a police cruiser, or in this case, like a rescue truck or what have you. So it should all wash to zero. And the reason it hasn't here is because of our inability to go back into when there were a lot of details being run at, for example, Spooky World, to be able to figure out how much of that should be washed out of this fund. So that's somewhat, we're gonna try and spend this down. How we're gonna do it, I don't know right now. I talked to Jason on it, but there's no good answer right now how to get that down, but that's one of the things we'd like to do. Police forfeiture is pretty self-explanatory. That's for cases where the police may arrest somebody, for example, a drug dealer, and they take items, what have you, that type of thing. That fund can only be spent in particular on certain items, and the federal government controls that, not the town. So we have to, before we spend any money out of there, have to be assured that it goes through almost a checklist that the federal government would have. Parker Footbridge is a footbridge down at the end, down by Mr. Peoples' house, as a matter of fact, down at the end of Pinecrest, across the brook. That was when the town used to have a small parking area as you face the brook across Route 3A on the right side, and you would try to get across the brook by a small footbridge. DOT donated this money to the town when they redid that bridge there. Since that time, there's been a small parking lot that's been put on the other side of the bridge, so there's really no need for a footbridge. So we don't know right now, and we gotta find out what we can do with this, so it's kind of hung out there. It may be that we could use this and combine it with highway block grant money, but we don't know right now. So we've gotta investigate that further, but that's the genesis of that money.
It'd be nice if they could use it to fix up the park a little bit down there, take down some of those dangerous trees.
Are we getting an echo?
Yep.
Yes. It's
I
not
didn't know
just
if you were.
reverberating.
Is the bridge still there?
No,
No. It was taken out or washed out.
it was taken out when they did the road project.
When they did the road project. And that was, how many years ago, Ray?
She was long.
20?
ago.
Just had it in the car bridge.
Should be able to tell you that, right?
Yeah. In dog years, it was probably 5. So that's the Parker Footbridge. New Hampshire grants, this is a fund where we just try and categorize special or put into a controlled account anything that we receive from the state. So for example, we may get grants for police department, such as doing, we got some grants, for example, for doing ATV patrols, to that type of thing, or for fire department to do different stuff. So this would be the location where those monies would be kept separate and held. Yeah.
You skipped over
Did I? I'm sorry. Yeah. I thought I'd get away with it, but I didn't.
275 anniversary.
Yeah.
Okay. So anyways, that's New Hampshire grants.
$1.50.
There's $1.15 in there. I don't think it's gonna do too much for the town, but be that as it may. 275th anniversary, there was a bunch of money that was dedicated to the town to celebrate the 275th anniversary, which I believe was held in 2011. That town had that celebration. We did all types of fun stuff, and there was money that was left over. That money, by vote of Recreation Commission, was, and the Board of Selectmen, was being used to set up a gazebo here at Darrah Park. The Recreation Commission did not want to use a gazebo per se, so they set up, if you look at the end of the edge of the ball field, a shed roof is really what it is, with picnic tables under it and stuff like that. So that was what was used. The money that's in here now will eventually be used for some other stuff, but that's where it came from. Industrial development was money that was given to the town to handle how do we want to develop anything in terms of an industrial basis. That's $16,000. That money is being spent. It's been combined with donations from a citizen of the town to do a study on the sewer systems, if possible, and how we would want to handle that going forward. Crowell Investments. We can't find any data on this, and part of the problem is this was established in 1991. We're trying to figure out what it is. It does appear that in the past, monies have been spent for doing some repair and patching on Albuquerque. So what we're thinking right now is that that money will eventually probably be folded out of that fund into doing some work on Albuquerque Avenue. So, town timber. Several years ago, there were, I think, 2 areas of the town that were logged out to try and thin it out, and the county logger or the county arborist went through and came up with a plan on how to do that. One of those areas was up by, well, where that new Sawmill Brook recreation area is, in back of the tennis courts. That money went into the development of that area. But the money from the town hall was kept separate, and the selectmen decided that we would set that money aside and use that for any improvements that were needed around the town hall. So right now, any of the external improvements, for example, grass seeding, tree removal, we got a tree in front of the town hall that may need to be removed. We may want to take that out, but that's what that money would be used for. Highway block grant, I think everybody knows highway block grant, so I won't bore you with that. But this account here is where money comes in, gets held, and then gets spent. Bill, you look like you
No,
want.
I'm with, the next
Okay.
one is the one.
Stimulus bike path. This is an account that contains money for the, it was given to the town from both the federal government and I believe the state for construction of parts of the bike path. We can't track back through into the early books as to whether this money should be dropped into general fund or what have you. So what we've done is let this set aside, and our intention is to use this to maintain the bike path in some fashion. So for example, if you go outside here in front of the high school, you can probably remember, well, you might, Bill, that there was an area towards the exit where water used to collect big time.
Awful.
And that was, we had I think a French drain put in there and elevated hot top and stuff like that. So what we did is we used money out of there to try and do that. So for example, any types of repairs of cracks, or if we gotta take and resurface part of it, or whatever the case may be, we're just gonna pull it out of there.
There are sections that are really trying to get beat up. They started plowing it with the heavy trucks and just broke it off on both sides.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could do it that way.
Yeah, so rather than try and go through the exercise of trying to track it all back and everything, we just said, leave it there.
It's gonna
And,
need repairs.
and we'll use it when the need arises, and that's what we decided to do. Now I think I'm ready to go skip over New Hampshire grants. LGC surplus, that is from the health trust surpluses that we received. So those were the surpluses that were given back to us by LGC when we were a subscriber to their health plans, and we use that to offset the costs, that type of thing. Planning board grants are for any grants that the planning board may have. In other words, these are funds that would be holding those grant monies, and then those grant monies would be paid out of them until, at such time as the appropriate documentation and billing was provided. And unanticipated revenue, this is money that would be collected from unanticipated revenue during the course of the year. So, for example, we had a Corning Road property that was taken for lack of payment for taxes. So any additional funds from that would go into here. And also property liability, for example, any monies that would come from that may go into here, that type of thing. What we'll do is, it'll either be earmarked for some special purpose, and if it's not earmarked, then we'll clean it out and drop it into the general fund.
No police grant?
Police grants would be under New Hampshire grants.
All right, any questions on special fund?
I just want to make one, as far as the police details and that fund that you have there, when you're looking to run it down, I would certainly want to hope that you leave some money in there, just due to the delay in contractor payments. Sometimes they bill out 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. You get a small contractor that comes into town, and sometimes they beat feet without paying the detail. So I would hope that, although it's high now, that you would leave some type of buffer in there.
Wasn't it the fire detail?
There's both fire and
Both
police.
of them.
Well, the way that works is we should be zeroing those out simply because all of the money we're collecting should be for a
Right.
valid purpose. So what ends up happening is, for example, you know what the wage of the officer, and I'll use police as an example, who works it, you know what the cost for the car is, and you also know what the administrative cost is for determining the hours and stuff like that. So that would be the fees that we end up collecting. And then once those things are known, we have to pay the officer right away. We can't not pay the officer.
Right.
But in terms of the cost for the car and the cost for the administrative costs, those would get reimbursed at a point once the contractor's fees come in. And then that would zero it out. All the money would go into the police detail, and then it would go back into the general fund or go into the budget as necessary to offset the costs that we paid out of the budget in order to do that.
Well, I understand that. Is that money that there, is that stuff you said, if I misunderstood it, and explain it to me, but that's money that you said you couldn't go back in the books, that $20,000, I believe it is?
Right, because the books were not adequately kept a while ago.
Okay.
So what, if you're talking about the fire, right now there's only 2,400 in the police detail.
Okay, 2,400.
But if you're talking about the fire, and part of that 2,400, all of these are a snapshot in time.
Mhm.
So the 2,400 could be monies that are waiting to go into either to pay for the police cruiser or to pay for the town. So that may end up washing out. I don't know,
Okay.
okay? The 20-something thousand, and let's see if I can find it. I think it's 21,000, 21,700.
Is that in the fire or the police?
That's in the fire.
Okay.
Okay? We'll be spending some of that probably to take and handle equipment upgrades or doing things like that. But that money also would work in the same way as I described for the police, where the money, once it comes in, you know, we pay out of the budget the money that goes to the police or the firefighter to do that detail, and then we backfill that into the budget from these funds.
Any other questions?
Just a comment. I have one thing that would make this report handier over time, even though the new name is really wonderful. March doesn't really describe the snapshot in time, so maybe you might want to put like March 2015 in this.
Well, if I do that, then Bill will say that he wants to review this at the next meeting because it's a new report or something. I like that.
You've done what I wanted to hear.
All right. And then just the RSA 32:22 is just there to remind us that one of our functions is to review expenditures, which we get weekly from the town. So are there any questions on any of?
Quick question. How is the town resolved the maintenance of the IT? Are we still on a stipend, or did we actually gone on a contract for that?
There's been no change. We haven't done anything at all.
So you haven't gone on a contract?
We've done nothing since,
So you're maintaining the
Town
way you
meeting.
you have in the past?
right, John's
Yeah.
basically doing it. There's no stipend, there's nothing, no decisions made, nothing's going on.
All right, moving on to school business.
I actually have a few things. The first one, and from our warrant article, the position of database administrator is at the moment on hold. We recently lost our director of technology. So, first thing we're doing right now is looking for a director of technology before we look for the other position. I just,
Who was that?
that was, Tom,
Kyle.
what's his last name?
Dewar.
Dewar.
Was he a new?
He
Yeah,
was
he was only
brand
there for a few
new,
months.
yeah.
Yeah, he took Kyle's place.
He's gone already?
Yeah,
So how are you bridging that gap? That's,
Big.
yeah. Well, right now, they're in the process of interviewing for the director of technology. And Brian Akers is right now more or less just taking over, keeping things together right now, so. Yeah, he left us abruptly, so kind of in a hold. So that right now is on hold. And as far as the SIS system, that's something we're discussing also, whether we go forward with it right now or wait for a new director of technology to make that decision. Do we wait a little while? Do we wait till next year? Right now, it's all kind of a little bit on hold. Next thing is you did receive the enrollment report. That's pretty straightforward. The only thing I'll point out is our fourth grade incoming class is now at 100.
Third grade.
Right.
Yeah.
Fourth grade, the incoming fourth grade. We're up to 100.
Whoever comes in from the third grade and fourth grade
Mm-hmm.
will be some number. Which may be 100,
Well, right now it's 100.
and you funded the teacher anyways.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's not an issue.
Right. As far as the budget preliminary dates, I know we said we'd start on the 5th. It looks like right now we're going to have the budget to you on the 11th.
Which, November 11th?
Correct.
Veterans Day?
All right.
That was the end of World War I.
Yeah.
I remember it well.
And why?
Well, I haven't talked to the BA and the superintendent together.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, the superintendent was out of the meeting yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But right now, they set up a time frame, and I asked them, I spoke to the superintendent to ask whether or not he can go back and see if we can move that up where the date we had for the beginning is the 5th.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier the better.
Okay.
'Cause when were we gonna start reviewing it?
November 5th.
Sorry, losing time.
So we might be behind 1 week. But I actually was hoping that it would get to you sooner than that.
Yeah,
So-
well, and so we'll just leave it at, if you can get it to us sooner, that would be better. I'm gonna leave it on the schedule.
Yep.
If we don't need that meeting, we won't meet then.
The plan that I saw laid out by the BA as of right now, that I can assure you that you'll be getting a much cleaner budget presented to you. I'm just hoping it gets to you a little bit earlier.
Yeah, because I know the discussion was that they were going to try to get all of their budget information at the end of the school year.
Right.
While staff is here and is fresh in their mind, so that then it could be worked on over the summer. So, if it's gonna be worked on over the summer, I'm a little surprised that September and October are gonna go by and,
Right. And again, I'm planning to have further discussion with them so we can like consolidate it. I mean, looking at the
Mhm.
calendar that I saw briefly, seems like the dates were kind of like spread out where we could probably consolidate some
mhm,
meetings so that we could get it earlier.
okay. Yeah, so I mean, we'll just leave our calendar the same. And even if we don't use the 5th, I mean, we have 5 dates set aside for the town, that still leaves 5 dates set aside for the school.
Yep.
So we'll manage it.
The other thing I have is, another board member had brought it up, and I told him that I'd suggested it last year, and I'll put it out there again, that this member thought it might be a good idea to, if a member of the budget committee were at those meetings when we're discussing budgets. I realize, you know, it's somewhat redundant as far as then you're gonna be in this room going over them, but it kind of gives the budget committee an idea too of what the thought process when we're going through it. And as I explained to this member, that I know that several of you watch them on TV, so you have an idea.
Mhm.
But I know that, I think it might be helpful.
So, you mean a member of the budget committee come
Just be in the audience,
and provide input?
I think just watch the process we go through, as far as for the budget.
Okay. So then are the members of the school board gonna come when we do our deliberations?
I'm here.
I know you're here.
As far as the rest of them, I'll
So that
invite
they
'em.
understand the rationale behind why we're making our decisions and they don't go off
Well,
in a tizzy.
It's a good point, and I'll bring it back to them. I agree. But, I mean, and I'm
No,
not saying
the-
every meeting, but it
The more
might be-
conversation, the better.
I just didn't quite catch the answer to the question as to whether the budget committee member would participate in the discussion or just sit and listen.
What I thought I heard was the budget committee member would sit and listen.
Correct.
Okay. And what I would tell you is that way back, I used to come to school board member meetings, and it's not worth it for me to sit and listen if I can't participate in often. And that's a dialogue that I look for in a meeting. And just to be a person listening,
You guys will do it online.
don't need that.
But there is a section for public input afterwards.
And again, public input is not discussion either, because we say something, but there's no response. It's not the right form.
Best thing in the world, we wanted somebody in public input representing the budget committee as one individual, right?
Again, I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah.
That's really about what I have.
Okay. Were there any, I know we got a budget update from the school board. Are there any questions or? All right. Anything else for the school then? All right, so then moving on to member input and old business, just old business, I have the calendars that we discussed last week, so I'll just, and I think I should be able to do this electronically too. It'd be nice if it could be posted somewhere, but I'm not sure how that, where.
Do we have a Google Docs?
We do. You know what? I'll ask Jason how to get it posted somewhere so that, I mean, obviously a paper copy gets lost, but, yeah, you know, I'll see if I can get it posted somewhere so it's available. And then just, I wanted to go through, and then when, I think when Frank Byron saw that I had put on the agenda just the process for the budget season, he had talked previously to us about his thoughts of the process. So he did send just a letter to us talking about, again, his thoughts that he had shared with us previously. So I just wanted to have a dialogue as to what do we want to do different, what worked, what didn't work, and see going forward what this year is going to look like. I mean, already we've got some differences in terms of we're going to get budgets earlier, and we have a much better stretched out schedule. So I think that will be helpful, and just, you know, Frank, do you want to talk to, why don't we start with you talking to us about what you sent in your letter and give us a little overview, because obviously the community doesn't know what the letter is in front of us.
Well, I sent a letter as a private individual, so I'm not sure if I'm talking as a selectman or as a private individual.
You're talking as a private individual, just someone who has
The
some,
microphone.
someone who has some insight that you'd like to share with us.
I think, looking, and I've said this to the budget committee month, 2 months, 3 months ago, whatever the case may be. I think that one of the things I wanted to express was maybe there's a different way of doing the budget. And that way, I think, I get a sense that members of the budget committee would like to talk on a free-ranging basis amongst themselves as to what they think are the pluses and minuses of a particular budget. I think that there's some level of frustration on the part of the governing bodies, boards of selectmen, I know, for sure, have some concerns, and again, I'm not speaking on their behalf at this point. But I think the idea would be that allowing the budget committee to get the budget a little bit earlier, spend some time going through the budget and getting ready for their questions, getting ready for what discussions they want to have, what direction they want to take, and in doing that, making the budget transparent to the people and the members of the budget committee, but by transparent, I mean they would get an in-depth knowledge of that, hear different ideas and hear different thoughts on what should be done with the budget. And then at that point, bringing in any of the resources that the budget committee may need, such as department heads, members of the boards, I mean, of course, I would be here, town administrator, that type of stuff. But being able to get those answers so that you can satisfy yourselves that the budget is either constructed the way it should be or should be modified to some other standard. I think there's some benefit in doing that. I think that the benefit is to this committee that you get to do an in-depth analysis, and deep dive on the budget, where sometimes it appears that members haven't had a chance to look at that before they get into those discussions. It is always frustrating, I think, to me as a observer of this, that you invite in a department head to explain their budget. What tends to happen is you go through it, limited amount, if any, questions get asked, and then the next week you get into the in-depth questions, and the department head's no longer there, and you're going to take a vote on it. It just doesn't make sense. I also think that you could save time by doing it this way. For example, if you have a department where the majority of the committee is relatively satisfied with the construction of that budget, you don't have to spend a lot of time bringing in a department head to do that, or getting explanations of it, or even holding reviews of it. You can basically vote it at that point when you need to. So I'm thinking that it could also save some level of time at that, in terms of some of the smaller budgets. The bigger budgets, of course, I think you're gonna go through, but different idea.
So just, what happened 2 years ago was we reviewed, and it happened on the town side, we reviewed the town budget. At the end of the budget review, a whole bunch of changes came through, and there was frustration as why are we opening lines up? Why is the information changing at the 11th hour? What we did this past year, which the goal was to alleviate that, was we reviewed all the budgets, made changes, but then from November through the 1st of January, we left it, we didn't take a final vote until the first week of January. And then we did that to the school, but there was a shorter amount of time between December and, of course, the first week of January. The goal being, if there are any unusual issues, outstanding questions, information that needed to be gathered, information that changed over the course of a couple of months, that the budget was still open, and then the final votes took place in January, giving enough time to make any of those changes and adjustments. So how is this gonna differ than what we at least tried to do this past year? There were a couple of months where any of those people could be brought in, if new information could be brought in. How is this gonna make that better?
I think personally that having the free-ranging discussion as a budget committee, as a group of people, rather than being presented with the budget and voted on the next, and voted to some level on the next week, would allow the budget committee to familiarize themselves with the details of the budget. If the budget committee feels that what they're doing is fine, that's fine with me. I don't have the one way or the other, but
Yeah, I don't know if it's
just-
fine or not. I'm trying to understand the difference. Like, what will this gain us? So, so I guess so the very first meeting then would be, instead of looking at it department by department, it would be an overall.
I'm making a suggestion that as one option. You can take multiple views on it. When we talked about this several months ago, actually it was before March's now, I understand, because I think Mr. Cutter was here at the time. He suggested that having the governing bodies come in and make an overall presentation may make some sense. So that's what I incorporated into that. You can do that, not do that, whatever you want to do is works.
You know, if you look at the school model, if I may, to me, it's quite similar to what you're actually proposing, because the first thing we do with a school model is the superintendent comes in and lays out his whole objective and what's in the budget and what they're trying to do with it. And then the only time we have, it's up to them when they bring their people in, okay? And it's up to them if they come for the second meeting of the vote. For example, Tom Lucklater came for the vote on the LMS, and it was very helpful, and to me, that is a good way to go. The only thing that I would have done differently in this model is what we did 2 or 3 years ago, where we knew we were going to be coming in and voting on certain budgets, and each one of the budget committee members laid down where the areas were that they had concerns with and what they might be proposing, and that went to all members, including the representatives. So there was no misunderstanding what was going to be voted on, what subjects going to be debated, so everybody was prepared, if they disagreed or didn't disagree, prepared for the meeting.
Right.
That's the one thing that is missing, in that we come into the meeting to vote and nobody knows what we're gonna propose in many cases. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. And it doesn't give people time enough
Well,
to respond to it.
let me, talk about the last budget that we did, which I was a member of the budget committee on for that one. We came in on one night in January, and I had no idea what was going to be discussed. We had no ability to understand what the concerns were or anything else. We just know that, okay, we're talking about highway department, where are the cuts? And we had people who had made cuts earlier, we had more cuts that were being proposed and everything else. No idea why, what, or where. And I think that giving, or being able to have an understanding as to what are the concerns of the budget committee, and then being able to, as a town governing body, address those concerns, and maybe we address them, and maybe maybe what we address isn't sufficient to justify the concerns of the budget committee, makes it so that at least we've had a shot at being able to be prepared for and to address those concerns and issues.
All right, any other?
I think similar to the school, I mean, the conversation we've had, and I mentioned to the budget committee, I think the first meeting, it is similar to what Frank's saying, is that we'll present the budget. And it won't be, the administrators will come afterwards, rather than being there, because, similar to what Tom Leckletter did. Because when you're ready to vote on it, is when, if you're ready to make a cut, then that administrator will be here for that reason, and be able to explain it, rather than trying to explain it the first time, walk away, all of a sudden, you're ready to vote on it, and you say, okay, well, I want to cut this, and the person's not in the building. And I think that's what you're saying, Frank, right?
Yeah, but that's your prerogative to bring them, to both of them. It's probably, if it was my budget, I'd go to both of them.
But I don't think you need the administrator to present their budget, necessarily.
Yeah, it's up to you and you guys from that point of view. But I agree, I think if they're there, and, because there will be questions that'll come up regardless, it's a good thing to have them there. The school's a little different than the town, because there aren't as many people involved in terms of having to be there. And I honestly think if we do our job and get our questions out with enough time for you to see what we're questioning and proposing, it makes things go a lot smoother, and there are no surprises to everybody.
Well, that was my conception of why you have a discussion internally to the budget committee, because you can lay out what those concerns and issues are. And when you express your, as an example, if you express your concerns, maybe Ray says, hey, I got the same issue, but I also looked at it this way. And maybe that sheds better light on what the real issue is.
Yeah, the only drawback of trying to do that by virtue of sitting down and going over the whole budget in 1 or 2 meetings is that many times the question or concern doesn't even show up, even though you've gone in and looked at the budget, doesn't really show up until you had a chance to talk with the person who's proposing it.
And see, that's the trouble I have. Until I'm hearing the person, when I see $100,000 in a line item, it may not trigger anything, but when that person comes and says, okay, the $100,000 is broken down this way, and this is what we're gonna do with it, that then triggers the questions.
Yeah.
So I am struggling with, and I can only go back to when I was a school board member, we asked the administrators to come both nights.
And I think the merits of this proposal are valid, but exactly what you just said, as long as I've been here, I remember every year saying, have the department heads show up every night when they propose it the next night. I mean, we've heard some cases pushback. It's like, no, the town administrator is more than capable of presenting, they don't have to be here, or, you know, we can do it, or we don't want to ask them twice, or they're busy. You know, that's, like Bill said, it's their prerogative. You know, you could have every department head here every meeting if you think it'll help. They don't, I mean, we've asked, I've asked, so I guess you don't need us to do anything additional this year because the invitation's always been there. They could, I mean, I don't even think or you invited Mr. Lecklad. I think he just showed up on his own.
Yeah.
So maybe it just takes, so yeah, I agree, go for it.
Save himself some
Just
money.
get the word out, tell everybody to be here, every department head, be here every meeting. You know, if they got the time, come on by.
But I think we have an obligation to tell them what we're gonna be asking about, okay?
But usually, a lot of questions are formed after we learn what's in it, like Cindy just said, because I read, I mean, I remember days Thanksgiving, just sitting reading the whole budget, going through it, and as soon as a words come out of the mouth, then it's like a question. And even not that night, I'll go home and then have the question that week, and you're right, the following week we vote.
But then get it out to him that 2 or 3 days after you've seen it, so they, at least they know, when they
I
go to
agree.
vote, here's what I'm thinking about. And here's what I'm thinking about in terms of changes,
Right.
okay? And then let everybody see it, so there's no question. And the committee understands where you're coming from, the school board understands.
But I mean,
I think he ought to be doing that. And I think that gets it, I think Frank's concern is that his, and it's not a bad perception, is that each one of us is different. Some of us spend a lot of time digging into it. Some of us don't have the time to spend the same time digging into it. And he's trying to say, we all ought to be digging into it and understanding the whole thing that's in there. We're all different.
Yeah.
Okay. But at least if we can get something out ahead of time before we vote on it.
But at what point does that become an illegal meeting?
that's
That's my concern, and why because all it takes is like 1 or 2 people to respond, and all of a sudden you get in trouble.
And that's what you just can't do, you can't respond.
But you
So-
can't stop somebody else from responding, and then you all get in trouble, you know.
But that would be coming out at a meeting, so it's not an illegal meeting.
What I think I'm hearing is, what we need to do with the town is what we do with the school district, which is ask for a general overview, goals, needs, wants,
executive summary.
an executive summary from the town, whether that be from the representative or it be from the,
Up to them.
right, whoever that is. And then it sounds like on both the school budget and the town budget, maybe the budget committee spend, and maybe even that night, a general overview
First night, yeah.
of, you know what, wow, this budget's up $1 million and revenue's down, and so that sort of general, this is a solid budget, this is not a solid, whatever. And then, as we go through the budget, and you're right, we did one year, everybody had to submit, you've gone through the budget, where do you see places that you think need reductions? Submit that ahead of time, so that we all come to the meeting. And when I was on the school board, we used to do that too. You would come to your budget meeting,
your
school budget
proposal.
meeting, and everybody, and Michelle would compile a list of what everybody had submitted, so you all knew what was gonna be out front for discussion.
So they brought them to the meeting, or did they send them before the meeting?
It was sent ahead of time, in the school district, Michelle compiled it. Here, you would probably send it to
To
me,
you, and
and
then-
I would FYI, like I do any other
Okay.
data, FYI it to everybody else.
I just know some wrists got slapped not too
Yes,
long ago, so I want to
absolutely.
make sure that,
And that's why I say,
okay.
there can't be any reply. You can't say, oh, look, Ray wants to cut $10,000. Hey, Ray, why do you want to cut $10,000? No.
All right, so.
Ray wants to cut $10,000, you come to the meeting and you
Right.
go, hey, Ray, I saw you wanted to cut, why?
Okay, so like if we just send them to you and then.
Yep. Yeah, so we can definitely,
Can we chew on that whole thought process till our next meeting?
I
don't know how to
like
think
the
about that.
idea. I think it's a great idea to get them out because I know some people are, but I have just been afraid to send any emails to everybody about my thought process
Me too.
because I'm gonna get screwed.
no, if it goes through the chair, I FYI it out,
Right.
and there's no discussion. Just like when we get the enrollment data, we get Frank's letter, we get,
And I think that last meeting, when we took everything into consideration, we had all the school board stuff, we had basically the revenue, we had the town stuff, and the thought process that went in here was delivering an affordable budget.
But also, there's an assumption of what we talked about tonight too, which I don't, maybe I'm reading it wrong, what was said, that we aren't prepared or we are not studying the budget in depth. Now, you know, I'm not about to make that assumption. I think conversations had, and good, solid conversations had taken place. I think the only thing that might be lacking from what I'm hearing is a second chance at defending a cut or trying to reconvince us to not make a cut by either bringing in more of the troops or giving another shot at it. So I think that's really what we're talking about. I'm hoping it's not being said that we are doing things or making cuts or judgments on the budget without really knowing what we're doing.
and that was the goal of the
Well, I can
January.
tell you for a fact that I asked one member why he wanted to cut a particular line item last year, and he said just because. They couldn't give me an answer.
Well,
Who was that
That's not-
person? We're all
Okay.
here.
no, that's not a very good reason, but-
And besides, it could just be one example, but that's still okay not to make a total, you know.
And that was the goal of the first week in January, is to revisit everything once all the cuts had been made, so that if there was additional information, or you needed to bring in people to defend it, or, and that was the goal of doing it that way. So, certainly we can, keep the discussion open as to whether it makes sense to bring cuts ahead of time, or is that what we've already done by making our decisions throughout the process, and then that last week making the final decisions.
Yeah, because didn't we, this past budget season, we put money back in or reversed the cut?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess, that's the point I'm making. I mean, we do study, there are second chances, and we think through it. I think what it was is there was just, some people might have thought the budget committee might have taken a little bit too much off, which is might be prompting this conversation right now.
No,
I think-
actually, that's not why I proposed this. I proposed it simply to accomplish two things. Number one, I wanted to accomplish it so that it's more of a productive interaction between the budget committee and as far as I'm concerned, the town selectmen, so that it's a give and take. You got questions about the budget, we should be getting you answers, and not just, we're gonna cut this without allowing us the ability to show you why we're doing that. So that's number one. Number two, it is my impression that some members of this committee come prepared and some members may not be as prepared as others. And I think that having those discussions in an open forum with the ability to talk and to leverage off of other people's thoughts on the budget makes sense. It educates the members, all the members, to a certain level, and it also allows all the members to understand the concerns, the issues, and the thought process of the other members of this committee. Those were the two things I was looking to accomplish.
And Brian, did you have a thought?
That was, that hopefully can also eliminate what happened on the last meeting when a budget member decided hacking the budget all over the place and
Hey, you know what?
What?
This process
no,
was
but
done.
that's what you're talking about as far as having conversation, sending that, so at least then we'd be prepared, either be the town side or the school side, that there's a member out there who's looking to, cut out $500,000.
I don't think I shied away from that from the start, for the record.
All right,
But if we move forward with what I think we suggested we would do, which would be get our our proposals out ahead of time,
Right, it wouldn't just be a bomb drop at the end, like,
that'll address your concern.
If we could get the school budget 4 weeks earlier, then we'd have more time to do that, right? I mean, we would have more time to analyze that data. We get it. I'll be honest with you, we do the school budget in the busiest time of the year for most people, last quarter of the year. Right, last quarter for myself is tremendously busy, plus Thanksgiving, plus Christmas, for those who
I think
celebrate it.
we're all busy that time of year, but here's the thing, here's the commitment that you all made, right? To be on the budget committee.
And-
I think sometimes too, it'd be nice if the entire budget committee could be here for all the budget meetings.
Well, I don't
We
think
had pretty good
I
attendance
missed
last
one meeting last year. I was in
Yeah.
California
well,
in the fall.
and I'm, like I said, I'm hopeful the way now, rather than having the school review Tuesdays and Thursdays. So in some cases, we're making decisions with only 48 hours in
In
between.
between.
Right.
So this way, by getting it earlier, and now the meetings are able to be once a week, hopefully that alleviates that.
Well, and like I said, I can assure you that it's gonna be a much cleaner budget coming at you with more description. And I think another reason why the administrators don't necessarily need to be here that first time when it's presented. I think between the BA, the superintendent, and myself, we'll be able to present the budget to you. And what questions you have, that person could be there.
And
And I'm
just-
not to say the person wouldn't be there both nights.
Yeah.
Because they may.
And just for the school board, I think now you've got a sense that one of the biggest drivers of the budget and decision-making is historical data.
No,
So,
Where?
take that when the, school board members go through, take that into account, really dig in and look at the historical data, because
And-
that's what's gonna drive many of these decisions.
and honestly, last year for us, it was twofold. We received it somewhat late, so we rushed it and then just like pushed it ahead. I mean, the high school's a perfect example. We received it, went back, said, cut 75, and you saw it, she just right across the board.
Mhm.
Then the question was asked in here, why'd you cut it? Well, it was, across the board cut.
Mhm.
And that's not the right thing to do.
No, but that all comes down to how much time you have to,
Yeah.
I mean, we're examining that in a very, very short period of time. If anything we could do to get that earlier from the school, I mean, we're already getting pretty early for the town. And it would help, even if we didn't make the decisions till the end of the process, it would help everybody have more time to analyze and at least ferret out those questions.
But in the school budget, there are really only about 5 or 6 big items that we usually look at, that we have to look at.
Transportation.
And the rest of the stuff is the small stuff, like the cuts of supplies and that.
Well-
And that's a global thing. And the issues that I think this budget committee has with both budgets, I think the governing bodies know what those issues are. I mean, I'm always gonna ask healthcare, I'm always gonna ask on handicap. There are certain things that you always ask those questions on because they're the obvious ones that come up every time. So enough said.
All right, any other comments? All right, any other input, budget committee member input?
Yeah, I guess when it comes time, when it gets close to the budget season, we're gonna, like usual, we always start out the conversation is what are the expectations, I guess, of the committee. I'd like to talk more, maybe it doesn't matter, but maybe it does, more than just the year. Could we talk 5 years down the road, maybe?
Well,
I know it's a tough conversation.
the committee is really a committee for 1 year, and
Right.
then there's new faces. Sometimes there isn't, but in general, there's 1 or 2 or more new faces, so.
I'm talking, I'm not saying making decisions for future budget committees. I'm just talking tax impact. I mean, every year we talk about, the tax impact this year is gonna be big.
Well, so one of the things that came up last year, but we had kind of a lot on our plate last year trying to define what our role was. One of the pieces of information that I came across and didn't bring forward was a lot of town budget committees have bylaws. This is how we're gonna run, and I haven't been so long in even looking at some of the other town examples that I got, I couldn't even tell you an example of what's on them. But is that what you mean by a long-term look?
I don't know what I mean, but that could be part of the conversation. I mean, just discussing the conversation. I'm guessing 5 years ago, if we would've said, where we're gonna be, I mean, you don't know, because we're hearing things now from the town, we're getting a lot less revenue next year. So how is that gonna mean 2 or 3 years down
I'm
the
sure if you
road?
talk to the town, they have a 3 or 5 year plan.
I'm sure they do. I'm saying, I'm talking this committee.
Same with the school.
To understand what's happening, moving forward, because we're going year by year.
I agree with Cindy, that's really not our role, it's a continuing
Yeah.
committee that turns over year after year. We're not a financial committee, per se, okay? We have a stated role, which is to develop a number to be presented to the voters, and that's it, and, what's gonna happen 5 years from now? I have no idea, I don't think anybody in this committee has any idea on that, and to me, that would be a waste of time to try and do that.
Okay.
And I feel the same way about bylaws, to be honest with you. I look at what the school board does and what their responsibilities are, and they spend hours and hours on approving bylaws, and that's not our job, I think we pretty much know how we're functioning, we've been functioning this way for years, and I, for one, would not want to get in a situation where I'm voting on bylaws for the budget committee to operate under. It hasn't been an issue in the past, I don't know why we would even have to go that route.
Now, you've been here a long time, I've been here
Yeah.
a long time, so we know what the expectation is. A brand-new person walking in, that might be helpful to them to understand how it functions, what the expectations are.
Doesn't take long to learn.
Our onboarding process is basically your first budget, right?
I just want a
Seat
new
of
member.
the, seat of the pants learning.
Cindy, I just want a new member to make a motion. I'll say, Robert's rules. No. They did it to me.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Well, it's just,
Superintendent
it's, like I
Hamlin.
said, it was, in all the stuff that came up last year, that was one piece that came up that I just sort of set aside and said, don't want to deal with it this year, but I just want to throw that out. All right, if there's nothing else for tonight, is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
A
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Our next meeting is the end of May, May 28th. It says 2014. So it, somewhere around May 28th, 29th.
We've already lived it.
Yeah, I know. Sitting down, it's not-